Greetings. My name is Marguerite Dalboja, and the title of this lecture is Who Caused the Crash of Malaysian Airline MH17? Wait, you see the chart. It's terrific. First, I want to give you the data. The passenger airline departed from Amsterdam in the Netherlands on July 17, 2014 at 12:14 p.m. local time. The UTC time is 10:14 a.m. The longitude is 4 degrees east, 7 minutes. The latitude is 52 degrees, 3 minutes. Now you have the data for your chart. Before we start, I would like to talk about the history of Ukraine. What happened in 2014, Viktor Yanukovych was running for president. The election was in February. However, in November 2013, the EU presented him with an agreement and a package deal, and they said, if you want to join the EU, this is what you have to sign. Well, he turned it over to the experts, and they said, if you sign this, Ukraine loses $160 billion. So, of course, he didn't sign. Now, the moment Obama heard that he refused to sign, he was certain that he would have him out. He would oust him if he was elected president. Well, in February of 2014, he was elected president. And then Obama gave $5 billion to neo-Nazi party and 4 other right-wing extreme parties. One of them said, kill all the Russians. The purpose of this money was for them to train and on cue to start a violent street demonstration. That's the purpose of this. So the $5 billion, they buy the guns and they can start the street demonstration at the right time. Now in February 2014, Poroshenko was elected. And the moment he signed an economic agreement with Vladimir Putin, it was a good economic agreement. That was when the street demonstrations started. They had orders to shoot everyone in the Regions Party. That's the party of Yanukovych. Yanukovych was frightened. He gets on his helicopter, he flies to Russia. These street demonstrators then go to the Rada. The Rada is the parliament. And in the parliament, they force everyone to resign. And then they put themselves into power. Intelligence, defense, security, the police department, armed services. Victoria Nuland was the Assistant Secretary of State for the United States. And she approved of all this. She put in power for an interim president a banker. The people hated the banker. Then they set a date for the new election, for an election. In the meantime, on May 2nd in Odessa, there were pamphleteers. They were trying to prepare pamphlets to tell the people, look, if we join the EU, this is what's going to happen. This is what happened to us in 1984. We had the IMF, the World Bank. The interest rate was so high, they ruined us. And the austerity programs, they'll ruin us. These pamphleteers were intense. The Nazis burned the tents. The people were frightened. They go into the Trade Union Center building. It's a huge building. They burned the building. Everyone in the building was burned alive. Those who tried to jump through the window, they were shot. All this is fine with the United States, with Victoria Nuland. Now I'd like to show you a picture of the leader of the neo-Nazi party. His name is Ole Tianabok. This was the picture of the plane. Now, notice in the plane, the bullet holes. These are bullet holes in the cockpit. As soon as the crash occurred, President Obama said, the Russians caused the crash with a Buck missile. A Buck missile damages the plane, the top of the plane, not bullet holes in the cockpit. And then a commission was formed to study and investigate and tell us who really caused the crash. That was supposed to be 3 months after the crash. It's a whole year after the crash. No report. Perhaps someone has integrity. Why should they ruin their reputation and have no self-respect? So, now I'd like to show you a picture of Ole Tianabok with John McCain. John McCain approved of Ole Tianabok. He was a great speaker. When he spoke to 300,000 people. He mesmerized the audience. He had behind him the forces of evil. This is what Hitler had. He admired Hitler. The forces of evil are so powerful. That's why Hitler was able to mesmerize the audience. It's like an emotional vortex. Even if you don't believe what he's saying, you're caught in this emotional vortex. And what he was saying was good. I mean, it was true. I mean, he spoke about the corruption. He gave details of what was happening in Ukraine. Now, this Assistant Secretary of State, Victoria Nuland, appreciated Ole Tianabok. She valued him because he was a great speaker. They were impressed with him. Victoria Nuland set a date for the new election. The new election was going to be May 25 of 2014. At that time, Poroshenko, he was a chocolate billionaire, he was elected president. But Eastern Ukraine wasn't represented in this election. It was only Western Ukraine. So what the U.S. did was start a civil war. A civil war was started. So then, with this civil war, Poroshenko had his soldiers bomb the homes in East Ukraine. People were desperate. They fled into Russia. All this is horrible. This is so horrible. And yet, this is the plan for the United States. This is the United States' plan. It's really not the United States. It's beyond the United States. It's the financial elite, the global elite, who are controlling the United States, the president. Now, let's look at the chart. Let's look at the chart. You'll see in this chart, the ascendant, you all know where the ascendant is. The ascendant signifies the passenger plane. Libra is on the ascendant. The ruler, Venus, is in the 9th house of long-distance travel. Venus squares the ascendant. What does that mean? It means it's a self against self aspect. It means it's doomed. Its fate is sealed. It's horrible. Now let's look at the midheaven. Cancer's on the midheaven. The moon rules Cancer. What is the aspect? The moon squares the midheaven. What does that mean? It's a self against self aspect. It means that there's conflict in the government. Conflict, and this is said again and again in the chart. That's why I love this chart, because it shows what is really happening. Now, let's go back to the passenger plane. The passenger plane was going to Malaysia. From Amsterdam, it passes through Ukraine. While it's passing through Ukraine, someone in the government gave an order to the air controller to change the flight path. In other words, the flight path was changed to a lower distance, closer to where there was fighting in Donetsk. You can see their purpose. They wanted to blame everything on the Russians. The air controller noticed that there were 2 fighter planes escorting the passenger plane. So the moment the plane crashed, he tweeted 2 fighter jets caused the crash of the passenger plane. The moment that happened, his Twitter account was canceled, his life was threatened, his family's life was threatened. He happened to be a citizen of Spain, so he was deported to Spain. In Spain, the reporters spoke to him, and he indicated to the reporters that there was a conflict between the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of the Interior. And the Ministry of Interior was dominated by the neo-Nazi party. So there you have it. Now let's go back to the chart. The planet that's highest in the map is Mercury. It conjoins the midheaven. Now Mercury symbolizes youth. Youth could be someone young, could be someone immature, it could be someone who's inexperienced in government policy. Mercury symbolizes the neo-Nazis. And when I say neo-Nazis, I also mean those 4 other parties, the extreme right, all together. They were the ones who got the $5 billion. Now, Mercury squares the ascendant. Mercury has targeted the passenger plane. The passenger plane is the ascendant. Mercury has targeted to destroy it for its dissolution. Mercury squares the moon. The moon rules the midheaven. It's also the government. That shows conflict in the government between themselves. This is said again. Saturn, in the 2nd house, Saturn always represents authority, leaders, the government. It represents the government. Saturn sesqui-squares the midheaven. There again, it's saying there's conflict in the government. Now, it can even be shown again. The sun is in the 10th house. 10th house is government, it's authority figures. The sun squares Mars within 1 degree. Mars is the ruler of the 7th house of open enemies. Now, if we think of the Nazis as the enemies of Ukraine, in reality, they're enemies of the whole world. If we think of them as enemies, then the sun squaring Mars means it's a self against self aspect. It's government against government, because sun is in the 10th house. 10th house is government. Now, the nodes of the moon The nodes, when they conjoin a planet, it makes the planet stronger. So here we have North Node conjunct Mars. Mars becomes more violent. South Node conjoins Uranus. Uranus's extreme violence becomes more hostile. Both Uranus and Mars square the Sun. The Sun is in a T-square. The Sun represents life. The Sun is the life of the plane. So Mars and Uranus, with their bullets at the cockpit, they decompressurize the plane splits apart. That's the end of the plane. And that's set again. It's set again through Saturn semi-squaring the ascendant. The ascendant is the plane, Saturn is the government. Semi-square is very bad. It's like a square. So Saturn is destroying the plane. Saturn is in Scorpio. Pluto is in Capricorn. It means they're in mutual reception. When they're in mutual reception, it means they can change places. So Pluto takes the place of Saturn. Pluto semi-squares the ascendant. And Pluto is the coup de grace. It brings down the plane. That's the end of the plane. It's finished. Then let's look at the good aspects. Mercury conjoins Venus. Venus is money. Mercury, they're the neo-Nazis. Suddenly, the neo-Nazis have $5 billion. That's money. Mars, as ruler of the seventh house is also the Nazis. Mars trines Venus, means, again, they're getting money, $5 billion. Now, if you want to look at it at another way, you can say that the real enemy of Ukraine is really the United States, foreign governments, the global elite, using the United States for its own purpose, which I'll get to later. So Poroshenko is elected, and the United States sends in, during this war, private contractors. That's against the law. Why should private contractors why should they be in a civil war? To fight the Russians or to fight the East Ukrainians? We got this from a German newspaper. The helicopter that these private contractors were in was shot down, and all of them died except one man. So this is what the United States does. Now let's look at the chart. We've been looking at the chart, I'm sorry. Now, in March, I forgot something. The V, I forgot another thing. There's another good aspect that I love. Uranus is in the seventh house of open enemies. It inconjuncts Saturn. Saturn's the government. And inconjunct means a change of some kind. So you could say that through violence of either the Nazis, through violence, a change occurred to the government. Saturn is the government. So we have a change through violence. Now, the V in the chart signifies the vertex. That's another meridian. And when a planet is on the V, as the moon is, it makes the moon stronger. Now, I want to see what I missed. I missed a lot of things. There are three finger of God aspects in this chart. A finger of God aspect is called a yod, and it's Jupiter is at the apex of an aspect with Pluto and Neptune. A yod is formed by two planets that are sextile, inconjuncting one at the apex, and that's Jupiter. Jupiter is at the apex. How do you read this chart? You read it through what do the planets signify, what are they ruling, what house are they in. So here, Jupiter symbolizes good fortune. The moon trines Venus. The moon is the government. The moon trines Jupiter. The moon wants good fortune. The country wants good fortune. That's what it means. However, Jupiter is in a finger of God aspect. Neptune, which symbolizes illusion. Pluto symbolizes death. So Neptune to Jupiter says, good fortune is an illusion. In fact, there's the death of good fortune. Pluto also rules the second house of money, so there's no money for the plane, for the government, for nothing. Now, there's another finger of God aspect. Neptune is at the apex of a finger of God aspect. Jupiter sextiles Libra. They're in sextile. The ascendant represents the airliner. Jupiter again is good fortune. Neptune again is illusion. So there's no good fortune for the plane. That's the end. Then the third finger of God aspect has Pluto at the apex. Jupiter sextiles the part of fortune. The part of fortune is in the 9th house of long distance travel. Pluto and Jupiter could say death for good fortune and death for good fortune for long distance travel. And in addition, Mercury, which symbolizes the neo-Nazis, it opposes Pluto. Pluto is also the ruler of the second house of money. The 4th house signifies the owners of the plane. Are the owners going to make money? No. The neo-Nazis oppose Pluto. Pluto is co-ruler of the second house of money. So there you have it. You have 3 finger of God aspects, all showing illusion, no money. Now there's another aspect that I neglected, and that's Neptune trining Mercury. Mercury, the neo-Nazis. That's a good aspect. Neptune is in the house of children. Children adore the neo-Nazis. The neo-Nazis set up summer camps for little children, and they're treated with respect. They adore them. The young people in Ukraine, they see the media and the EU, and they want good fortune in the EU. They just want it. However, Neptune squares the part of fortune. So their hopes and dreams are all an illusion. And then Pluto inconjuncts the part of fortune, and that kills off their hopes and wishes. That's it. Now, what did I miss in here? What did I miss? Anything? I got the nodes. Okay, now we'll go to the E. The E signifies the equatorial ascendant. In other words, it's an additional ascendant. It's not as strong as the real ascendant. But if you have planets on the equatorial ascendant, it makes it stronger. Now, I have Jupiter on the equatorial ascendant, and Jupiter is in a grand trine, and that's damn good. So how it rules in my chart is I have the right philosophy of life. Jupiter is philosophy of life. It's higher mind, it's the soul. Higher mind is the soul. So that's how it works in my chart. Now, I send out 3 pages a week through email of the ageless wisdom teachings. These are the teachings that Pythagoras and Plato had to study when they were disciples. Really expands the consciousness. It's great, it's great. And it's free. Anyone can receive it. All they have to do is go to my website, www.freepythagorasteachings.com. Now, in my in these lectures that are written, I take them from the Tibetan Master. The Tibetan Master worked through Alice Bailey. At first, he approached her and he said, would you like to work with me? And she said, no. So her own master said, I think you should think it over. So she thought it over. A month later, she said, okay. And this is the way he worked with her. He uses mental telepathy. See, she thought she was going to be a medium. She was going to be unconscious. That's why she said no. So the Tibetan Master wrote, maybe 20 books with her. And in all these books, here's what the Tibetan Master says. If you learn anything from these books and teachings, learn to think in terms of electricity, a positive polarity and a negative polarity. That's it. Everything is fire, it's electricity. Like the personality is the negative polarity to the soul. The solar system is the negative polarity to the star Sirius. Now, I would say that the Earth, the situation on Earth at this time, is a real negative polarity, really negative. You have ceaseless wars, you have corruption. It's horrible. Now, when you have a negative polarity, a positive polarity has to form to balance it, negative and positive. And that positive polarity is the greatest thing the world has ever wanted. Every religion has been waiting for the Messiah, the Christ. He's called by all names, but he is still the same person. He is at the head of the spiritual hierarchy. Spiritual hierarchy are the teachers and guides for humanity. So now we see the picture of the Lord Maitreya. The Lord Maitreya is the head of the spiritual hierarchy. And the reason we have this picture is that he appeared in June 1988 in Nairobi, Kenya, at a healing gathering. And the reason we have this picture is because the editor of the newspaper was present. When he sends his love to you, you just cry like a baby. You can't help it. It's so wonderful. Now, every religion has their own name for him. The Christians call him the Christ, the Jews call him the Messiah, the Muslims call him the Imam Mahdi, the Buddhists The Hindus call him Krishna, and the Buddhists know his personal name. They call him Maitreya Buddha. And on page 211 of a treatise on cosmic fire by Alice Bailey and the Tibetan Master, it was written in 1925. Here's what the Tibetan Master says, under footnote, the world teacher. The Buddha held that position until his illumination, when the present world teacher, the Lord Maitreya, took his place. The Occidentals call him the Christ. That's what it says in page 211 of a treatise on cosmic fire. On page 430 of the Rays and the Initiation, the Tibetan Master speaks of World War I, World War II. He considers that as one war, not two wars. That's one war. And he says that the door to the forces of evil were not closed completely. So in other words, the forces of evil are still there. And he says, the forces of evil work through three centers. A center in Central Europe, the Zionist movement in the United States, and Israel. Now he doesn't say Israel because Israel wasn't a state then. This book was written in 1947. Israel became a country in 1948. But the editor says, wherever you see Palestine, it refers to Israel. So those are the three forces of center. Then, in the next paragraph, he says, in the maps of the spiritual hierarchy, there's a map that indicates a dark, overshadowing cloud over Europe, East Europe, all the Middle East, all the Arab nations, all of that territory. And he says, can the intelligent planning of the United States, Great Britain, and the United Nations, can they be wise enough to dissipate this cloud, or must it result in disaster? Well, you figure it out. How can we have the cloud dissipate in the world situation today? I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't see it. There's another thing that I have to tell you. Today, in June of 2015, Poroshenko was frightened. He was frightened. The NATO nations planted nuclear warheads directed at Russia in Ukraine. The neo-Nazis want war with Russia. He cannot control the neo-Nazis in his cabinet, in the government. So what he did was petition the Supreme Court of Ukraine to declare that the former administration of Viktor Yanukovych, that his administration is the legal government, that his administration was a coup. You don't hear that on the news. You don't hear it in NATO countries or in America. No one hears about that. That shows you how uninformed the people are in the world, except in other nations like Russia and when they get that news. Or unless they go to the website. Good websites will give you this news. But you don't get it from Wikipedia and you don't get it from the major media. That's it. And this is why the major media, Kissinger said, whoever controls the media controls the people. Whoever controls the money controls the world. And he's right. It's the banks, the corporations of the global elite that create the depressions, that create the wars. In 2008, these Federal Reserve, the banks of the global elite, made $26 trillion, which they shared among themselves. I mean, this is profitable for them. And today there's derivatives exchange in 1.5 quadrillion. So you see what's happening. What's happening is the global elite wants change in all governments. It wants regime change. It has a plan. It has a plan. I'll tell you what its goal is. Its goal is one world government ruled by themselves with their own army, with one monetary currency, controlling the people, you know. Today, look what education costs. It's horrible. They don't want people to be really educated. So, what I see is a nuclear war coming up. And the reason I say nuclear is that on April 28 of 2014, Vladimir Putin was meditating in a monastery, and he got the vision of a nuclear war, wherein Russia would be the only country fighting the United States, the only country. And so he told the Kremlin was afraid. Here's what's happening. They need regime change. Russia stands in their way for the moment. They have to get rid of Vladimir Putin because he's already wise to their plans. And first we have to, the Federal Reserve System is not federal. They're just 12 private banks. It was foisted on us by the global bankers and the American bankers in 1913. December 23rd, Congress was ready to go on vacation. They signed anything. And Wilson made his biggest mistake. He signed that legislation of the Federal Reserve Act. And this is the act that has to be repealed. Ron Paul, the Congressman Ron Paul, says that act has to be repealed. The Federal Reserve has such power, autonomy. It can lend billions to the NATO countries, to EU, to anyone. But then it says, you have to vote the way I want. So the NATO nations are blackmailed. The people are uninformed. People are uninformed. And you can't have anything where people are uninformed. People can't know about Maitreya. The media knows about Maitreya. Now here's another thing that the Tibetan Master said in his books. He said when the time came for, he didn't say the reappearance of the Christ, when the time came, he said none of the so-called spiritual organizations would be of any help. Neither the Alice Bailey group, the Theosophy, Rosicrucian, Masonry, churches, none of them. None of them. It's only these little disciples and aspirants that are trying to get the word out that this great master, the head of the spiritual hierarchy, and Buddha held that position thousands of years before, is here now. I mean, he's a focal point for energies from other solar systems. His body, he created his own body. It's a mayavirupa. Bullets can go through it. It doesn't harm him. He can walk on water. He can change himself into a woman, a child, anything, a beggar. But the people don't know about it. And that's the problem. Now, here's something that could happen to make this event known to the people ahead of time instead of 100 or 200 years from now. If disciples and initiates and masters, if masters and disciples would sacrifice themselves and be born into these families of the global elite. For instance, 8 families own 80% of the New York Federal Reserve. Rockefeller, Goldman Sachs, Lehman, Kuhn Loeb, the Lazarus of France, Rothschild of France and England, Israel Moses Sykes of Rome, And did I leave out anyone? Layman. If masters or disciples could be born in these families, then we could have the right time. They could announce, let us hear Maitreya. Or if, we have hundreds or thousands of groups, organizations that are altruistic, they want to help humanity. If they could unite under the banner of goodwill, they could tell their people about Maitreya, and then the people could say, we want to see Maitreya, or we want change in the government. The reason they don't want Maitreya is Maitreya would bring change in the economic system. The disciples already have a plan for an economic system doing away with the major banks. They don't want that. They want to control through their own economic system. It's based on debt. And listen, if you've never heard of the movie Thrive, Thrive, you can download it under Thrive Movement. It explains everything about the banking system, the global elite, everything. The Federal Reserve. It is great. And so if you do anything, please download it. It was made by a millionaire. Now, I could give you the references if I'm finished here. The references are for your benefit. One thing I want to tell you, it's so easy to get references. Here's what I do. I go to a website that I admire, I feel is correct. The government doesn't like it, so I know it's good. Here's what I do. I go to globalresearch.ca for Canada, and then next to that I type in Ukraine, neo-Nazis, Ukraine, $5 billion, Ukraine, Poroshenko, or anything I want. I could say ISIS, I could say Executive Order 1110. Oh, that's a good one. Or I could say, Leo Wanta, W-A-N-T-A. Oh, that's another good one. You get so much information about what happened in the world in the past with the Executive Order 1111. John F. Kennedy tried to take over the Federal Reserve. And what happened to him? That was in June of 1963. And what happened to him? He was assassinated in November. He wanted to stop the Vietnam War. I don't think I have time for Leo Wanta, but you can check it on the Global Research website. It is good. It relates to Russia. It relates to the Reagan administration. And it relates to the Clintons and the Bushes who wanted the $27 trillion that Leo Wanta collected from the stock market. What he did was, through borrowing $2 billion from the U.S. Treasury, he had the Russian rubles go down from $1.27 to 23 cents. That ruined Russia. That was in the 80s, the late 80s. That was the end of Russia. And then he made $27 trillion. Well, Reagan trusted him because he saved Reagan's life. Reagan made him the trustee of that money. The Clintons wanted that money. The Bushes wanted that money. They put Leo Wanta in jail for years. Look at these people, all for money. And it's who puts in power these leaders? It's the global elite. The Democratic Party and the Republican Party are both the same when it comes to foreign policy. That's it. The global elite puts them there. That's why Hillary will be president, because the global elite wants her there. That's it. joyous, people. This is what the Master tells us. Be joyous. Everything's going to be okay because the forces of evil cannot win. It's the forces of light, spiritual hierarchy that wins in the end. Thank you.